Hi, everyone. I am Attorney General Kris Mayes, and I am so happy to be joined by my colleague, California Attorney General Rob Bonta. And we are here today because the health and safety of children across the country is not a political issue. It is not a culture war talking point. That's why today, Arizona and California are leading a multi-state lawsuit against the Trump administration, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the CDC over their needless, confusing, scientifically unsound, and unlawful revision of America's immunization schedule. Let me be clear about what happened here. In January, an acting CDC director with no medical or scientific background signed off on a so-called decision memo that stripped 7 critical vaccines of their recommended routine vaccination status in favor of an unwarranted shared clinical decision-making recommendation that is confusing for parents and providers alike and difficult for providers to implement. The vaccines that got unlawfully demoted are protect children from rotavirus, meningococcal disease, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, influenza, COVID-19, and RSV. And it was done astonishingly without notice or public comment. This wasn't based on any new science. It wasn't based on expert consensus. It was based on an ideological agenda, one that Secretary Kennedy has been pushing for years, if not more than that. And to clear the way for that agenda, Kennedy fired all 17 members of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, otherwise known as ACIP, the expert panel that has guided vaccine policy in this country for decades. He replaced them with individuals who, in many cases, simply don't have the qualifications that the law requires. This is not how science is supposed to work. This is not how government is supposed to work, and all of it was contrary to law. The facts on the effectiveness of vaccines in protecting America's children are not in dispute. Among children born in this country between 1994 and 2023, routine childhood vaccinations prevented an estimated 508 million cases of illness, 32 million hospitalizations, and more than 1.1 million deaths. They generated $2.7 trillion in savings for our society. These vaccines work, they are safe, and the science behind them is overwhelming. What Secretary Kennedy has done and what the Trump administration has enabled throws science out the window, replaces qualified experts with unqualified ideologues, and then uses the resulting confusion to undermine public confidence in vaccines that have saved millions of lives. The consequences of this won't be abstract. Lower vaccination rates mean more outbreaks. You are seeing this with the recent outbreaks of measles across the country, including right here in Arizona and Mojave County. More outbreaks mean more children in hospitals. More children in hospitals means greater strain on our state's Medicaid systems, on our public health infrastructure, and our schools and our communities. The administration points to countries like Denmark to justify these changes. But here's what they leave out. Denmark has a universal healthcare system. That means that all mothers are cared for during pregnancy, and every child there has a doctor that they can see after birth. In Arizona, and in rural communities across the state, across this country, millions of families don't have that. More than 100 million Americans lack regular access to primary care. Telling parents to just talk to their doctor sounds reasonable, but millions of families without a doctor, for those millions of families who don't have a doctor, it is essentially meaningless. Copying Denmark's vaccine schedule without copying Denmark's healthcare system doesn't give families more options. It just leaves kids unprotected from serious diseases, such as meningococcal disease, that has an over 10% fatality rate. That's why we are asking the court to declare this new vaccine schedule unlawful, to vacate the illegal ACIP appointments, and to stop this administration from gambling with children's lives to satisfy an anti-vaccine ideology. Arizona's children deserve better. Children across this country deserve better. That is what this lawsuit is all about. We want to ensure that families continue to be fully aware that vaccines continue to be safe and effective for their children, and we encourage them to vaccinate their children against diseases that are entirely preventable. And it's now my joy and pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, A.G. Bonta.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Attorney General Mays. I'm proud to join my colleague as a co-lead of this lawsuit, marking California's 59th lawsuit against this administration. HHS Secretary RFK Jr. and his CDC are flouting decades of scientific research, ignoring credible medical experts, and threatening to strain state resources and make America's children sicker. Their actions have been unconscionable, illogical, and illegal. From blowing past appointment requirements for the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, including that it be fairly balanced, and instead appointing several anti-vaccine advocates and people without clear credentials in immunization science, to allowing the unqualified and unlawfully appointed members of the panel to reverse nearly 30 years of CDC policy recommending that hepatitis B be universally administered at birth, to removing 7 vaccines from the list of universally recommended childhood vaccines, despite the overwhelming evidence supporting the effectiveness of the previous childhood vaccine schedule, and doing so without any new scientific evidence, any recommendation by a lawfully constituted advisory committee, or any systematic review of the available data. RFK Jr. and his CDC are violating the law, making a mockery of what should be trusted as the nation's leading voice on vaccinations, and endangering our children. As California Attorney General, I refuse to allow RFK Jr. to threaten the health and well-being of the more than 8 million young people who call the Golden State home, the 400,000 babies that are born here in California each year. RFK Jr. has long been one of the most prominent anti-vaccine activists in the country. He's been at the forefront of a dangerous movement that has significantly eroded trust in safe and effective vaccines. While RFK Jr. is entitled to his own personal opinions, mind you, not facts, he isn't entitled to use his opinions as the basis for breaking the law and endangering our children. The fact is, among children born in the US between 1994 and 2023, researchers have estimated that routine childhood vaccinations prevented approximately 508 million cases of illness, 32 million hospitalizations, and over 1.1 million deaths. All told, these vaccines have generated an estimated $2.7 trillion in societal savings. That means without these vaccines, not only will our children and vulnerable individuals get sick, but our healthcare systems will have to shoulder the burden of increased preventable illnesses, preventable hospital visits, and avoidable costs. The fact is, vaccines save lives and save our states money. To get rid of them is illogical and unconscionable. To get rid of them in this way is illegal, which is why we're taking Trump and RFK Jr. to court. Before I turn it back to AG Mays, I want to give the Healthcare Rights and Access team at the California DOJ a shout out for the incredible work they've done to make today's lawsuit possible. While they don't do this work for the limelight, I want to take a moment to shine some on them because they deserve it. Katie Milton, Marnie Ganadis, Kathleen Borgers, Nimrod Elias, Nellie Palma, and with that, I'll turn it back to you, AG Mays.